It's crazy to think that just a few years ago, I was completely invisible to her, just a ghost haunting the edges of her perfect new life with my ex-husband. But when she saw me, truly saw me, for the first time since everything exploded, her face contorted into this grotesque mask of pure terror, and she let out a scream that still echoes in my nightmares. A scream that wasn't just surprise, but a primal, guttural shriek of a woman who thought I was dead. A woman who, as I would soon discover, had very good reason to believe I was no longer among the living. Was I wrong to let her believe it? To let them all believe it for a while? Tell me if you would have done the same thing if you were in my shoes. Let me take you back to how this nightmare began. My life, before everything changed, was comfortable. Not spectacular, but comfortable. I was married to Mark, a man I'd been with since college. We had a nice house, 2 cars, and what I thought was a stable, loving relationship. He worked in finance, and I was a freelance graphic designer. We had our routines, our inside jokes, the kind of comfortable familiarity that builds over 15 years together. We talked about retirement, about kids someday, about growing old together. I truly believed we were in it for the long haul. My parents, bless their souls, were hard-working, salt-of-the-earth people. They weren't rich, but they had always been incredibly supportive. My dad, James, had a small, almost defunct antique shop, and my mom, Sarah, was a retired librarian. They lived a simple life, filled with love and quiet contentment. Then, out of nowhere, about 2 years before the crash, my Uncle Arthur passed away. Uncle Arthur was my dad's older brother, a reclusive eccentric who had lived alone in a sprawling, slightly dilapidated mansion about an hour's drive away. We rarely saw him. He was always a bit of a mystery, a man of few words, and even fewer social graces. Everyone just assumed he was, well, comfortably off, maybe a few savings bonds tucked away.
Boy, were we wrong.
The will reading was a bizarre affair. My dad and I were the only 2 family members present, besides a stony-faced lawyer. That's when we found out Arthur wasn't just comfortably off. He was filthy rich. Like, shockingly, obscenely wealthy. He had made shrewd investments in tech startups back in the 80s, then quietly sold off his stakes over the years, living off the interest. He left everything, and I mean everything, to my dad. A cool $11 million liquid cash, plus the mansion and all its contents, which included some genuinely priceless art and antiques. My dad, a man who had never seen more than a few thousand in his bank account, was floored. He cried, he laughed, he just couldn't believe it. He hugged me tight and said, "This is for us, sweetheart. For our future." My dad, being the generous soul he was, immediately insisted on splitting the money with me. He said, "You're my only child, and Arthur would have wanted you to have a good chunk of this too. Let's make sure you and Mark are set up for life." I tried to refuse, but he was adamant. So, just like that, I became an overnight millionaire. 7 million for him, $4 million for me. Mark was ecstatic, of course. He suddenly saw dollar signs everywhere. He started talking about quitting his job, investing, starting a business. It was a whirlwind. We bought a bigger house, took a luxurious vacation, and I felt like we were finally living a life we had only dreamed of. But with the money, something else began to change. Mark changed. He became more distant, more secretive. His phone was always locked, he'd go out late, and his explanations for where he'd been became increasingly vague. I tried to talk to him, but he just brushed me off, saying I was being paranoid, that the money was stressing him out, that he just needed space. I suspected he was having an affair, but I pushed the thought away. I didn't want to believe it. Not after all we'd been through. Not after I'd shared my unexpected fortune with him. The crash happened a few months after I received the inheritance. I was driving home late one rainy night after visiting my parents. I remember the road being slick, visibility low. One moment I was humming along to the radio. The next, there were blinding headlights, a screech of tires, and then just blackness. The next thing I knew, I was waking up in a hospital bed, my body screaming in pain. My left leg was shattered, my arm was broken, and I had a severe concussion. But I was alive. Miraculously, incredibly, I was alive. The doctors told me I had been in a head-on collision. The other driver had been drunk and had swerved into my lane. He hadn't survived. They told me I was lucky to be alive. My parents were there, their faces etched with relief and fear. Mark, however, was nowhere to be seen. My parents made excuses for him, saying he was stressed with work or had a big meeting. But I knew. I felt it in my gut. Something was terribly wrong. A week later, still in the hospital, I finally got the truth, but not from Mark. My best friend, Sarah, came to visit, her eyes red and swollen. She hugged me tight, then pulled back, looking conflicted. I don't know how to tell you this, but Mark is with someone else. He's been living with her for months. He actually told everyone you guys broke up before the accident, so no one would question him being with her. My world imploded. All the little pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. The late nights, the locked phone, the distance. It was all true. He had been cheating on me, not just casually, but openly, planning a future with someone else while still married to me, still living in the house I'd paid for with my inheritance. And then the truly shocking part. Sarah explained that after the crash, when my car was utterly destroyed and the news reports initially misidentified the driver due to the severity of the wreckage, Mark had simply let everyone believe I was dead. He hadn't corrected the police, hadn't corrected the hospital, hadn't corrected anyone. He had just accepted it. He'd even told his new girlfriend, Emily, that I had passed away. He collected my belongings from our house, packed them into boxes, and told my parents he was too distraught to speak to them directly. He even started making arrangements for a memorial service that, thankfully, never happened because the hospital finally confirmed my identity. But for a few days, Mark had operated under the assumption that he was a free man. A wealthy, free man. My parents were devastated, not just by the accident, but by Mark's betrayal. They came clean about what they knew, admitting they'd suspected something was off with him for a while, but never imagined it would go this far. They had been trying to contact him, but he was completely ghosting them. That's when it hit me. He thought I was dead, and he was already moving on. He didn't care. He was probably already planning how to access my $4 million, money that was now legally mine, held in an account that only I could access. The thought made my blood run cold. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a calculated, heartless move. He was trying to erase me, to profit from my supposed death. The recovery was long and painful. Physical therapy was excruciating, and the emotional wounds were even deeper. But something hardened inside me during that time. The sweet, naive woman who had believed in Mark, who had shared her fortune with him, was gone. In her place was someone colder, more calculating, determined to get justice. While I was recovering, my lawyer, a sharp woman named Mrs. Davies, started digging. And what she found was sickening. Mark hadn't just moved on. He had been actively trying to manipulate our finances, even before the crash. He had forged my signature on a few documents, trying to gain access to accounts that were solely in my name. He had taken out a substantial loan against our house, my house, bought with my inheritance, without my knowledge. And the worst part? He had been subtly, expertly poisoning my parents against me for months, planting seeds of doubt about my judgment, making them think I was becoming reckless with money, probably to set the stage for him to take control if anything happened to me. He was playing a long game. A very, very sinister game. So that's the situation I was in. I was recovering from a horrific accident, betrayed by the man I loved, and staring down the barrel of financial ruin thanks to his machinations. I had to make a choice. Crawl into a ball and let him win or fight back. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have confronted him directly? Or would you have planned something else? I'm genuinely curious to hear your thoughts. Okay, so here's what I did. I decided to play dead, metaphorically speaking, for a little while longer. I kept my recovery private. Only my parents and Mrs. Davies knew the full extent of my plan. Mrs. Davies advised me that while Mark's actions were despicable, proving intent to commit fraud, and specifically proving he knew I was alive and chose to withhold that information would be difficult without solid evidence. We needed to let him dig his own grave. So, while I continued my physical therapy in secret, my lawyer began to lay a trap. We set up surveillance on Mark. It was surprisingly easy to get details about his new life. He was living openly with Emily in a swanky apartment, driving a new car, living the high life on what he assumed would soon be our money. He had even started telling friends that my late wife's substantial inheritance was now his to manage, and he was just waiting for the legalities to clear. He was planning to sell our old house, the one I had paid for, and liquidate some of my investment accounts. He even started talking about marrying Emily, hinting at a lavish wedding. It was infuriating, but it was also exactly what we needed. He was openly admitting his intentions, completely unaware that the dead wife was watching. The final confrontation was orchestrated with precision. My parents and I had moved into a discreet rental property, leaving my old house empty. Mark, assuming it was abandoned and he had full control, had put it on the market. The open house was scheduled for a Saturday afternoon. This was our moment. My physical therapist had cleared me for limited mobility with a cane, and I was determined to be there. I chose a simple, elegant black dress, and my hair was styled perfectly. I wanted to look strong, composed, and utterly unforgettable. Mrs. Davies had arranged for a private investigator, disguised as a potential buyer, to attend the open house with hidden cameras. Mark and Emily were there, playing the role of the grieving widower and his supportive new fiancé, showing people around my home. I arrived about 20 minutes into the open house, driven by my dad. I took a deep breath, adjusted my grip on my cane, and walked in. The house was buzzing with people, all oblivious to the drama that was about to unfold. I saw Mark first. He was in the living room, laughing, his arm around Emily's waist, pointing out features of the house, probably fabricating stories about our life together, or rather, his supposed single life. He looked happy, carefree, completely oblivious. My heart hammered in my chest, a mixture of fear and pure, unadulterated rage. I walked slowly, deliberately, towards them. People parted as I passed, some glancing at my cane, others just absorbed in looking at the house. I kept my eyes fixed on Mark and Emily. As I got closer, Emily turned her head, perhaps sensing my presence. Her eyes, initially scanning me as a potential buyer, suddenly widened. Her smile faltered. Then, her gaze moved to my face, and the recognition dawned. The color drained from her face, her jaw went slack, and her eyes bulged out of her head. Her entire body stiffened, and then she let out that scream. That blood-curdling, ear-splitting scream that I told you about. It wasn't just a yelp. It was the sound of someone seeing a ghost, a truly terrifying apparition. Mark, startled by her shriek, spun around, his face a mixture of annoyance and confusion. He saw Emily, then followed her horrified gaze to me. For a split second, his face was a blank canvas of disbelief. Then, recognition hit him too, and the blood drained from his face even faster than Emily's. His eyes darted around, looking for an escape, for an explanation, for a way to make me disappear. He looked like he'd seen the actual devil. "Surprise, Mark," I said, my voice steady, though my knees were trembling. The entire open house went silent. Every single person in the room was staring at us, completely bewildered. "Did you miss me?" Emily started sobbing, clinging to Mark, whimpering. "She's dead, Mark." "You told me she was dead." Mark, for his part, was speechless. He just stood there, paralyzed, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. He tried to stammer something, but no words came out. That's when Mrs. Davies, who had been waiting just outside with 2 police officers, walked in. "Mark," she announced, her voice clear and authoritative, "I believe you have some explaining to do. These officers are here regarding your attempts to defraud my client, your very much alive wife, and your attempts to forge her signature to access her assets." The police officers stepped forward, their presence immediately changing the atmosphere. The scene that followed was chaotic. Mark was arrested on the spot. Emily, realizing the man she was about to marry had lied to her in the most spectacular and terrifying way, screamed at him, then ran out of the house in tears. The potential buyers, initially gawking, quickly dispersed, murmuring amongst themselves. My dad, who had been watching from the doorway, came and put a comforting arm around me. The satisfaction, while immense, was also incredibly bittersweet. This was the man I had loved, the man I had trusted with my life and my fortune. And he had tried to bury me. The legal battle was long, but thankfully, relatively straightforward. With the evidence Mrs. Davies had collected, the forged documents, the recorded statements, and Mark's own admissions during his grieving widower phase, the case was clear. He pleaded guilty to multiple charges of fraud and attempted theft. He received a significant prison sentence, and a court order ensured he would never be able to touch a single penny of my inheritance or any other assets. Emily, I heard, was completely mortified and moved out of the city. She cut all ties with him. My old house was taken off the market, and I eventually sold it later, but on my own terms at my own time. It's taken me a long time to heal, both physically and emotionally. The scars from the accident are a constant reminder, but so is the strength I found within myself to fight back. My parents were incredible throughout it all, my rock. They helped me rebuild my life. I've started a new graphic design business, and I'm focusing on giving back to the community, investing in causes I believe in. The money, while a huge part of the story, isn't what defines me anymore. It's what allowed me to survive, to expose a monster, and to finally take control of my own narrative. I learned a brutal lesson about trust and betrayal, but I also learned about my own resilience. No matter how deep the betrayal, no matter how dark the moment, you always have the power to write your own ending. So, that's my story. It's been a crazy journey, and I'm still picking up the pieces, but I'm stronger now, and I'm free. If you are on my side through this whole ordeal, go ahead and like this video. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this, and please, share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section below. What would you have done differently? I'm truly interested to hear. I'll see you all in the next story.